Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two Hugh Grant enthusiasts watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question: is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? Today is our Christmas special, where we will be, of course, focusing almost exclusively on Love Actually. I'm Diggory Waite, and I'm joined, as always, by my colleague, co-host, and fellow Hugh Grant obsessive, Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Diggory, and Merry Christmas to all Hugh Grant fans out there in the world.
Yeah, happy holidays, whatever you do. I'm going to put together a best of 2020 episode, so we'll save the Happy New Year's for then. But yeah, how are you spending Christmas? Are you hopefully watching lots of Hugh Grant films, not just the Christmassy ones.
Well, Diggs, it's going to be a slightly different Christmas this year, but that won't stop me feasting on the turkey and knocking back the red wine and the whatever else comes with that. Hopefully I might be getting a good Christmas present. I know that you might be getting a good Christmas present.
My Christmas present from you is up on the table over there. Obviously, I haven't opened it yet, but there's already on the front of it, there's a little explanation as to what may or may not be inside.
Oh,
so
okay.
I already know that I'm in for an absolute treat, which is very, very exciting. So thank you very much for that, Oscar. My mum weirdly as well this Christmas was like, yeah, I want to do loads of cocktails, so I'm just going to be battered the whole like an absolute sausage all over Christmas. It's going to be mental.
I mean, I think most people will probably want a few drinks to forget about the last 9 months or so. So
That's true enough. Well, yes, unless you're a Taking Hugh for Granted fan.
Exactly. It's been a great year for Taking Hugh for Granted.
Yeah, we've had a great time. And today we've got a very special show because we chat to not one, not two, but 3 people about Love Actually. Oscar, who have we got on the pod today?
So we spoke to Beth, Amann and Patrick Flynn, who host the What is Love Actually podcast, a 12-part podcast that is dedicated entirely to dissecting Love Actually. And we also speak to film critic and writer Christopher Orr, who is notorious for writing 2 of the most famous reviews on Love Actually ever written, in which he absolutely lambasts the film.
Yes, so he did. And also he does again today, which is very, very exciting. And if that wasn't enough, we also put the word out to you guys to send in some Christmassy clips of yourselves, telling us what your favourite parts of Love Actually are, and also what you get Hugh Grant for Christmas. And there's some spicy responses to that, to say the least. And who better to start off than with superfan Mary. Mary, take it away.
Hi everyone, and Merry Christmas. This is Mary Fran from Illinois in the US. And if I were to get Hugh a Christmas present this year, I would say I would go with liquor. I feel like he's a whiskey drinker. I'm just taking a guess there actually, but I think I would get him a nice bottle of whiskey and maybe share it with him if possible. My favorite part of Love Actually goes without saying, but it's the classic dance scene. I don't think you can beat that scene in that film. His scenes with Martine McCutcheon are great, but the dance scene just makes everything a little bit better. If you're having a bad day, even if it's the dead middle of summer, it's the best scene to watch. Again, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas to you, Mary. I love that. The dead middle of summer.
I mean, everyone's done that. Everyone's done it once.
Exactly. And you're absolutely not wrong. I mean, we said that dance how many times have we spoken about it? It's absolutely iconic.
I just have the Pointer Sisters song like saved on my Spotify, so whenever I'm feeling bad, I just stick it on, regardless of the day or mood. In fact,
indeed. And if I'm ever feeling prime ministerial, I also put it on as well. I'll walk around my house doing a little jig. Fantastic. Right, let's have another one from Ella.
Hi, my name is Ella. I'm from Cardiff in Wales and I am a self-proclaimed Hugh Grant expert. If I could get Hugh Grant a present, it would probably be the keys to 10 Downing Street, because I think that he's proven that he is a more than capable Prime Minister. And my favourite part of Love Actually is the Christmas version of Love Is All Around, because it is just the most perfect song to sing at Christmas and it always gets stuck in my head for the entire month of December.
That's an absolute cracking one. I mean, first of all, it sounds like we need to get Ella on the pod as a self-proclaimed Hugh Grant expert.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely love that. And you're absolutely spot on. He would be doing 10 times a better job with the keys to 10 Downing Street and being our Prime Minister right now than our Prime Minister would be doing. But that's for a different podcast. That's maybe for a newscast or BBC News. And I have to say, obviously, I watched this film in preparation for this podcast, and obviously just because we love Hugh Grant. And boy, oh boy, does that song get stuck in your head. It's not left my mind since the 1st of December. It's kind of annoying, but also amazing. It's brilliant.
It is brilliant. Just the bit when he's like, fuck, wank, shit, bastard, arson, hole.
Hole. Yeah. Right, let's have one more.
Hello. So my name is Megan, and I'm currently living in Bristol. Firstly, Oscar and Diggory wanted me to share this story. So we're all pretty big Hugh Grant fans in this household, and as an early Christmas gift, this year I was gifted a life-size cardboard cutout of Hugh Grant, circa 2007-ish. And this friend happens to be an ordained minister. So one very drunken evening, there was a wedding ceremony, and I'm now technically married to the cardboard cutout of Hugh Grant. And I don't really know how to segue from that, so I'm just going to leave it out there. In terms of buying a gift for Hugh Grant, I'm going to try to keep it clean because
Classic.
I'm aware that Hugh has quite a large teenage girl fan base.
Worrying.
So for Christmas, I would give Hugh Grant something that can't really be bought, which is a signed copy of my very nearly completed PhD thesis, which I'm sure he will love. And finally, my favourite moment from Love Actually. I think a consistent theme across all of Richard Curtis's movies is this inability for people to properly communicate. So it always comes across as a bit awkward and a bit restrained. So I'd say my favourite scene is when Hugh Grant's Prime Minister is crossing Natalie inside the corridor, and he does this sort of awkward jazz hand gesticulation towards her, and it's just awkward and cringy and really funny, and he instantly regrets it. And I think it's perfectly charming and endearing, but in a really relatable way, because we've all had that moment where we've essentially made a complete arse about ourselves in front of someone we really like. So that's my favourite moment. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Megan. Wow. Oh, wow. If you don't know the bit that Megan's referring to, go back and watch the jazz hands. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's so good. It's so good.
I mean, Megan's been a big fan of the pod for a while now, and we have a good chit chat on Twitter from time to time. But I had never heard the story about being married. She must be the first person in the world to be married to a Hugh Grant cutout.
Well, thank you so much for your submissions. We'll listen to a few more of those in a minute. We've got our first guests here from the What Is Love Actually podcast, who've been sitting very patiently and waiting to talk to us about the film. So Beth, Patrick, it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys on. Can you start by maybe giving us a bit of a background about yourselves?
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So Beth and I are in the theater active in the theater community here in DC. I'm a playwright, and Beth is managing director for a theater company called Monumental Theater. And we met, I think, just in the course of doing business around here, right?
I did a reading for one of
That
your
was what it was.
shows as an actor, and then we didn't really work together in that process. Like, you had handed that off to somebody else to direct, and then you came and saw me do the reading, and then I came on your podcast, The Original Cast, and it's just been like this slow burn of like, and now you're on my podcast, and now you're my friend, and now you're doing a podcast with me, and now you're definitely my friend, and we're stuck together forever.
So I wanted to ask you guys, what made you start this podcast, and when did the idea first come to you guys?
The idea
That was all Patrick.
Yeah, the idea came to me hilariously like 2 years ago, Christmas time, when
Naturally.
And actually Diggory mentioned this before we started recording, that there's a whole 'tis the season of hot takes on Love Actually. And since we started this podcast, I actually have a Google alert set up to receive them.
How do you get the settings to set that?
Because
Takes,
all you do is
hot ones.
all you have to do is put Love Actually in quotation marks in your Google alert, and all the takes will be hot. This week, it has all been like 10 things you didn't know about Love Actually. Is Love Actually a terrible movie? Shut up, Love Actually is the best movie. But I was reading one of these takes like just in the course of doing business like 2 years ago, and it broke down the 10 storylines of Love Actually and ranked them. And I read the article and thought, well, this would be an interesting podcast, would be to take the 10 storylines and break it up and do it. And then you could have an episode on the front and an episode on the back, and that's 12 episodes, and there's 12 days of Christmas, and wow, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, I had this idea like Boxing Day 2018. So I then immediately set about trying to make this thing a reality, and Beth got involved early 2019, but it was a big project, and we wanted to do it right, and we wanted to do it slowly and really make sure it was the right kind of show. So we did a pilot in summer of 2019, then another episode Christmas 2019, and then the last year we started in earnest, just in time for everyone to go inside.
Just in time for everything to shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, this must mean that you must have watched Love Actually like so many times, and you must have also watched it like in the middle of summer, like several times when it was not appropriate to be watching the film.
Yeah. Pretty much once a month since like last Christmas. Wow. I think we've watched this movie. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot of, it sort of becomes Zen after a while. Like, like it's just sort of like, you just let it wash over you.
You know what's going to happen exactly. Like, it's very comforting.
You hear Bill Nye singing and you're just like,
I'll be entirely honest. Cause it's also the theme song to our podcast. So I've heard it a lot editing the episodes. I could not hear that song again for quite a while and be just fine with it.
Yeah.
But I still Patrick will edit the episodes and then send them to me, and then I'll listen through for any type of any notes, and like every time I'm just like I'm bopping along to like I feel it in my fingers, and like at the end like we end with a God only knows what I'd be without you, and even that I'm just like what a wonderful song. So it still does have some of its magic. I won't completely say like it's ruined for me.
It still does it for you. I mean, so Beth, tell us a bit about the format, because you've said that there's like 12 episodes and stuff, but you also have guests on, right?
Yeah, so we brought on 2 guests for every show, and our first one is our first episode's a look at Richard Curtis and all of his work, which for me was an interesting deep dive, because Patrick is someone who's been like very interested in film and an active filmmaker and involved in that side of the arts, whereas I'm like, who's that? What did he do?
Yeah.
So the first episode we really dig into who is Richard Curtis, and his body of work, the canon, as we could say. And then each episode after that, we break down a single storyline and we bring on 2 guests. And it's been so interesting to talk with people about it, because you have some people who we were able to match them up with the storyline that like they love most, and we have some people who were like, why in the heck did you give me this storyline? This is trash.
Yeah.
And And so we kind of keep that same format, like Patrick said, bookends on either end of like setting up the scene and wrapping it up. But we also have our second episode is with two folks who'd never seen the movie before. And that was interesting. We were able to do that when we could still see each other in person. This was filmed at Christmas time, recorded at Christmas time, 2019. And like we came over to my apartment. We had wine, we had cheese plates. It was wonderful. And we sat these two friends down, Solomon Parker and Josh Simon, and watched them just like stare in confusion at this film and then also become like completely enchanted by it and then talk about it afterwards. Like, what did you just make us watch? So we dig into every part of this film with very colorful commentary from a wide variety of people.
But that's what is the curious thing about the podcast. Is like in your intro / the trailer episode, you're both like, we hate this film, but we also love this film. Is that like what you get from most people when they come on? Do they especially those two as well? Do they watch it and do they hate it? Do they love it? Or was it like you guys seem to be kind of both?
I think most of the guests fell under the category of both, but there were definitely people who unequivocally hated this movie and unequivocally loved it, especially, and you'll be happy to hear, our Hugh Grant episode was a huge, like with Evan Casey and Tracy Oliveira, they love Hugh Grant, they love that sequence, they love the movie, and it was just person to person. But but there was nobody who had like just sort of tepid reaction to it. It was you either see both sides. You see, like I think Beth and I do, that like this movie is alternately wonderful and terrible at the same time, or you hate it with a fire of a thousand suns, or you love it because it's part of your Christmas tradition. And nobody has, sort of like, yeah, it's fine. That's nobody's reaction to Love Actually.
I mean, I was going to say to that point. I mean, I guess I'm wondering what your deep down opinions are now that you've watched this however many times. Because from listening to the podcast, it seems to me that you, Patrick, are more on the side of liking it, and Beth, you're more on the side of disliking it.
That's funny. I would have said the opposite.
Really? Oh, okay.
Wow.
I think I'm more on the side of not liking Richard Curtis.
Yeah, that is certainly true.
And
yes.
I think that's probably because for the first time I've looked at this film critically, and I've looked at the writing of it and the way the characters were written, and I'm finding things that I don't like. I don't like the way women are written in this movie. I don't like that there is I can't say that I'm like coming out of this like a Richard Curtis enthusiast. But I still I watched the movie the other day. Like I had convinced some friends, they were like, we're going to listen to the podcast, but we want to watch the movie. And I was like, okay, I'll watch the movie with you. And we're sitting outside with like a fire pit, an outdoor movie screen. Wow. I kept going like, oh, I love this part. Oh, I love this part. And I'm looking at myself like, you have criticized this film for the past year. And now like, I'm still like immediately enchanted by it. So
yeah, this is after around American Thanksgiving, Beth saying to me, I don't think I ever need to see this movie again.
Like 4 days later,
and then
I
not
sent
a week
picture.
later, yeah. She's like, I'm watching it again and I'm loving it.
Guess what I'm doing?
Yeah, I'm more, yes, it is absolutely true. I am a big Richard Curtis fan, sort of stopping in 2003. I don't defend his work after that point. But, so I love those aspects of it, and I love the Britishness of it, to be entirely honest, but I also, it's not my kind of movie in general. It's a little soppy. It's a lot soppy, actually, but it has some genuine, I really appreciate after watching it. I mean, in my whole life, I've probably seen this movie 40 times. And
wow.
I would say that, yeah, I mean, because it was, well, I saw it in the theater. I've been watching it every year probably for like almost 20 years. And then I watched it about 15 plus times in preparation for this podcast. Yeah. So it was a lot. But I do say I appreciate the moments in it that work so much more. Like the Liam Neeson storyline, I think gets better every time I watch it. And it's just such a wonderful short film inside of this otherwise very problematic
Mm.
movie. And I just appreciate a lot of the great acting, from Emma Thompson and Hugh Grant and Martine McCutcheon. It's just there's some really great. I love the parts I love more, and I hate the part like I can watch this movie without seeing the Colin and Tony storyline ever again, and I'll be just fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's still, I think that I'm okay with that storyline now because I have firmly decided that it is either a fever dream, they are a coven of witches, or it's a brothel, and they're like doing this great Ponzi scheme. We've decided within the storyline that like that can't be real. Like even in the context of like a film, a Christmas holiday romantic comedy, like it can't be real. And I am okay walking through the rest of my life believing that like Colin hits his head coming out of the airport.
He died in a car accident on the way to the bar, like something.
I'm not going to kill him. I'm not going to make it go that far. But like he is just imagining what America is like, and that's not real.
That's not real.
That's what's. I mean, and I know like it's like it's a joke, and like you say, it's a film, but that does. It's so farcical, that one bit, that it is a little bit like. This doesn't really.
It's
fit
a different
in the
movie.
It's a different movie.
It's a
exactly.
whole different movie, and it doesn't. It's the only part of the movie to me that feels like filler. It feels like we needed one more story, sort of like
which we didn't. This movie is very long.
Sex
we didn't need one more.
Yes. Oh my god. It's like as long as Saving Private Ryan. Every time I shoot it in, I'm like, oh, what have I done? 2 hours and 15 minutes. Are you joking? Yeah.
And that's the cut version of it. The original cut was what, 4 hours?
The
so
original cut was 4 hours. No, not at all.
No,
The
I
original
did
cut
not
was
know
4 hours.
that.
Yeah.
You guys have to see that. You have to see
But like
that.
as a mini series.
Yeah.
Well, that's in whatever capacity, because like I think the great thing I've sort of taken away from this movie is that I think the screenplay, the original 600-page screenplay, however long the damn thing was, probably was kind of more coherent as a theme. And one of the reasons the movie feels like it's fractured and has these weird tone changes and bizarre shifts in it is because a lot of the connective tissue had to be edited out in order to make a movie that could, screen 5 times a day in a local cinema. And so I just want to know, either see the full cut or read the full screenplay. I'd really like to know like what was the big vision for this movie that then got edited down into the 2-hour version. It could be terrible. I'm just curious as to what it might be. It might just be like a doubly long version of Notting Hill or something, and we'll all just go, oh
god.
No, thank you.
But that's for a lot of people. That's their big. That's what they shoot the film down for. They're like, it doesn't give enough time to these people, and you don't properly see them fall in love. They barely even have normal conversations. But you think, well, because of the way the film is structured, and it's already long as it is, because you're trying to fit like 10 storylines, and you can't fit any more into what you've already got, so you can't. But do you feel like that's a fair criticism, or do you have, because you can't really be like, oh, it's too short, none of it feels fleshed out, because the film is 2 hours 50 minutes already. If you fleshed it out anymore, like you say, it'd be 600 pages long. I
think it's fair criticism. I think it's a very fair criticism. I think that it has great ambition in scope, which is great. I love ambition, but it's too much.
Yeah.
It's also so funny that he goes for. I mean, Richard Curtis had written primarily single focus stories, even in his television. It's Vicar of Dibley, Blackadder, whatever. It's one person at the center of a maelstrom, and then you have 4 Weddings and a Funeral, which has a lot of storylines to it, but is ostensibly Charles's story. Notting Hill is absolutely just Hugh Grant. And Bridget Jones, even we'll give him that, is still also just Bridget. And then we get to this movie, and suddenly it's this myriad of characters, and there's so much going on. And I think it's very telling that he never did it again. That he sort of went, then it's, Boat That Rocked and About Time, and we're just sort of like back into that style of much more central storytelling. It's just too much.
I also think it's just not meant to be criticized the way we're criticizing it. Like, you're just supposed to take it at face value. You're just supposed to be like, oh, it's okay. We didn't see the development of that relationship because we were busy over here with like Aurelia instead of focusing on Natalie. Like, we've got other things to do. And you're just supposed to assume that there is conversations and developments in the relationships that you don't see. And the fact that we have like torn this apart, broken it down into each storyline, I think no one ever wanted this to be put under a microscope in the way that it has been.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is though, is that, that
you guys are making a podcast about this, and there are people who are listening to it. So there are people who actually want this to be broken down into these, 12 episodes, an hour long each. So I guess my question is, why do you think the film has become that popular that, there is a market for that?
I think it's one of those movies that like TV has a lot to do with it, that it's been on TV at the holidays since 2004, whatever it was out of theaters. And it's really easy to jump in because there are so many storylines. There are so many little vignettes. It's easy to pick up. It's easy to be like, oh, this is the part with like Colin Firth and this is the part with Hugh Grant. And like, I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes and I'm going to walk away.
And like I said, like it does inspire high emotional reaction, for good or for bad. So like people can love it, they can hate watch it. It doesn't really, they're watching it no matter what. And there's a reason that, my Google alert goes off every morning with at least 5 articles in it at this time of year, sometimes 10 every day. And I mean, essentially they're the same article, I should say, written over and over again. But it there's something about this movie. It captures kind of lightning in a bottle in a really interesting way. And I think there's just enough good stuff in it. And it's just simple enough in some of those stories. That criticism of it being there's not enough time, it actually helps the fact that like these two people love each other. That's the story. Like, great. I can follow that. I can follow that all day.
It's also that there are so many well-known actors in this, and like not just like there are well-known American actors, but like in England, I'm sure every single person is from like a TV series, has had a notable career. So for us in America to be like, oh, there's like 60% of these people we know and love, like it's 100% in England, and they have cast such a wide net of appeal with all of these different actors, and so you can be like, oh my god, like I love Bill Nighy, I can't wait to go see him in this film, whereas like someone from our side of the world would be like, oh my god, Liam Neeson, I can't wait to watch him like get mad that someone kidnapped his child. Oh wait, that's not the storyline.
Right, wrong movie. Yeah.
Wrong movie.
But I mean, not every time though is a great cast necessarily need to a great film. And one of Hugh Grant's most recent films, Cloud Atlas, I don't know if you guys have seen that film, has got a myriad of fantastic actors from Tom Hanks to Halle Berry, but is probably the worst movie ever made.
And I was gonna say, like you're so right, Beth, when you were talking about the vignettes, and actually almost when you were explaining it, I was like, "Fuck me, this is a great film. What are we talking about?" But like it because it's so good. You have these amazing actors. You have these, like you say, and you're so right again that you have everyone can get on board with. We're in love, these two characters, and they're in love, and for some reason they can't get together yet. And then that's the established thing. Then in the middle you have all the, like you said, Beth, you have all these bits in the middle which are like all these vignettes and all these big set pieces in the middle, like Hugh Grant's dance, like when they get when Colin Firth goes in the water to pick up all of his papers and stuff. And at the end you have payoff after payoff where people run through airports or
march through the streets of Marseille.
Kiss it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they kiss at children's concerts. You have all these amazing, and so you just think, and what they've done is, like you said, maybe they must have written 600 pages and then condensed it into what still makes sense, but it's all the bits that people love, and that's what we're gonna do. And you know what? Now I think about it, it's the best film ever. it's so good. It's so good. They've smashed it.
It's funny though, because when someone convinces me it's bad, I'm like, it's a crap film, absolute crap. And then when people are like, yeah, it's pretty good, I'm like, yeah.
It's really whether you weight the good parts or the bad parts heavier. Like do the things that bother you about it, do they ruining your fun? And for people we talked to on the podcast, it absolutely did. And for people, there are some people that didn't. It just really depends on your reaction. And I don't think any reaction is wrong. We come to, well, you have to listen to the podcast to find out. We do come to some kind of conclusions about this movie. But one of the big things we talk about over and over again is how it is a product of its time. And I don't think that's a cop-out in this sense as it can be. That all of the issues of the sexual politics in it are bad, but they're not super bad. And they're certainly, for 2003, actually pretty good. So it's kind of hard to...
Which is also like a horrifying statement. But
it is a horrifying thing to say. Yeah, right. It's more a comment on how like weird we used to be 20 years ago than anything else. I'm very interested to see how this movie goes forward, even in the next 10 years when people aren't watching things on TV. You have to choose to watch this on Netflix. You have to seek it out. Will it sustain? My guess is it will for at least a little while.
On the first day of Grantmas, my true love sent to me a Hugh Grant on my telly. 12 Brexit protests, 11 trolls on Twitter, 10 awkward stutters, 9 PMs dancing, 8 dodgy girlfriends, 7 curtain hairstyles, 6 tabloid hackings, 5 timeless films, 4 silly smiles, 3 posh words, 2 charming laughs, and a Hugh Grant on your telly.
So guys, I wanted to move on to I want your honest assessment of Hugh Grant in this movie, and then your honest opinions on Hugh Grant as a whole.
Oh.
As a person.
As a person, or hang on. As a person, or wait a minute. Like,
as an actor.
Okay,
Let's stick to actor.
Actually, maybe let's ask 3 questions in the film as an actor and as a person. Let's just defame his character as well.
I think he's probably a pretty good person overall, though. That's pretty all I'm going to say about that. Well, because one of the funniest moments in our podcast to me is that Beth did not know that Hugh Grant had been arrested in 1994 or 95.
I was
95.
also a child at that point, so it's important that passed over my head.
I got to pull up the mugshot on my phone and show it to her in real time, so that audio exists forever, and I'm so happy about it. Do we? Yeah, well, so it's funny. So I listened to your guys' episodes on a lot of your episodes in your back catalog, but specifically this one in preparation for this conversation. And I have to say, I kind of agree. I think where you guys landed on that, though, now I might be mixing this up with I listened to a lot of episodes of your show yesterday.
Wow, thank you.
Yes. Legend.
So
you're the one. We found the listener. We found it.
But so you decided that Love Actually does take Hugh for granted, correct?
I think so. I can't actually remember. I was really hungover that day when we recorded that.
I think and I think you're right. I think I love him in this movie, but the movie, not only for Hugh Grant, but also for Liam Neeson, Colin Firth, like almost all the actors, it really depends on the audience loving the performer to make the storyline work. And because it's Hugh Grant and Martine McCutcheon, that storyline works. If you put 2 less charismatic actors in that scene with those exact same lines shot the same way, it could feel bad. It could feel very bad. As we what do we speculate? It's Willem Dafoe and who did we recap? Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich.
Malkovich.
We put John Malkovich. Like, it wouldn't be the same movie.
No.
No, it's a very different movie.
And I really want to see it, but you know.
Yeah, don't you? A little bit, right? You're just like, it's called The Lighthouse, I think. But I think he's great and absolutely great.
I agree. I think that he's incredibly charming, but I also think there's a little bit of like, we're going to cast Hugh Grant as Hugh Grant, and he's going to be floppy haired and funny and silly and dance around, and then he's going to stand up for us at one point and make us all proud, and we're going to be really excited about it. But I mean, you can't he doesn't do anything. The character doesn't do anything in this film to make you like not want to root for him. So he's already charming to begin with. I'm on board.
One thing, I mean, you guys, we will invite you back. That is exactly the answers we wanted. Well done. But one thing,
we passed. We did it.
because we had another guest on who was like, "Yeah, Hugh Grant, he was all right." And we were like, "Get out! Do you not understand what this is?
What show you're on?
Yeah, the whole point of this."
Yeah, dude. But what about your guys' thoughts on Hugh Grant as an actor and his career as a whole?
I feel like I got to watch his canon during this process because Hugh Grant's just always been a person to me. I didn't know a time without him being like just Hugh Grant. I think the first movie I saw him in where I was like conscious that This Was Hugh Grant was music and lyrics with Drew Barrymore, which
is a great one.
I love that movie.
Great one to start off
I think
with.
it's a delight. I actually watched the trailer right before this just to remind myself how much I love it. And like Way Back Into Love is in my head now.
Love it.
But I've watched Notting Hill, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and Bridget Jones' Diary as a part of this process. And I think that Hugh Grant as an actor has really benefited from Richard Curtis's projection of Richard Curtis onto Hugh Grant. That Richard Curtis writes the person he wants to be and then has Hugh Grant play him.
Yep. Yep. Spot on.
Yeah.
And I think Hugh Grant is a charming actor and that he is lovely to watch, but I don't always know if like Hugh Grant plays anyone besides Hugh Grant.
Well, you need to go away and deep dive into some of his.
I will say I just watched The Undoing, and I think I think that's a phenomenal turn for him.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed his performance in that, and I felt like he wasn't just playing floppy happy Hugh Grant.
Exactly.
Well, it's difficult to do that when you're 60 years old and got grey hair and
Right.
you've aged a little bit.
I don't know. I think he could do it.
It's so funny because we come at it from sort of a 180-degree opposite. The first time I saw Hugh Grant, I'm now looking at his IMDb page, was in Impromptu.
Oh, wow. Interesting first film to have seen him in.
Yeah, it was my family loves a good, British costume drama like Enchanted April and Remains of the Day and Howard's End and all. So we would watch all those movies all the time. And so we watched Impromptu and I mean, For Funeral, as I say on my podcast several times with Beth and my podcast, is one of my favorite movies of all time and is a real, like, that's my Hugh Grant. And then, like, it's so funny, like, tracking his career. Like, yep, I saw The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill but Came Down a Mountain. That movie's weird. I saw 9 Months in the theater. Like, it's just like all these terrible comedies he was in. I forgot all about. Mickey Blue Eyes, for crying out loud. Mickey Blue Eyes.
Oh, Mickey Blue Eyes is the best gangster impression by an Englishman ever done.
It's such a weird movie, but yeah. So I remember him before he was Hugh Grant, or watched him become Hugh Grant, I would say, and so. I've really liked his later career. I like his career now. I think he's doing a phenomenal job, sort of like late Renaissance. And I'm excited to see Paddington 2. I have not seen it yet, but I hear it's excellent.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
You're in for a treat.
There's this, but I can't say that he's somebody who, like, I don't have to see the new Hugh Grant movie, but I agree with the premise of your podcast that he is underappreciated and underrepresented.
Yeah.
Because he's just good. I mean, I think he's one of those actors who's easy to overlook because he's just good. He's just really good at his job, and he's really entertaining, and he's a convincing, funny actor, and can do the emotional thing when he has to. And, he's not flashy about it.
Yeah, he also comes across, he comes across in interviews and stuff like that, like he's sort of underprepared and doesn't do his homework. But when in actual fact, I think he really does go and do his homework and puts a lot of time and effort into his, I know in Love Actually and other films that he's works quite closely with Richard Curtis and the writer and adds his own
and that's
lines
one of
and
the
that kind of
one of the
thing,
best things we got for Hugh Grant from our podcast was that Evan recommended this sit down conversation he had with Colin Farrell. Where they talked about acting, and we play a little clip of it in the podcast, but and there's a link to it in the show notes of that episode too. But it's this long conversation where they talk about acting, and you really understand how much Hugh Grant thinks about his performance and how every performance he gives, and how much he cares about it and puts work into it, and so you get a real sense of like, oh yeah, this guy's like a real actor. He's really thought about
and
he makes
it all seem so easy breezy. Like, I called him Happy Floppy Hugh Grant because he just has this very easy manner about him when he's performing, when he's doing interviews, and knowing that he's put so much preparation in, and then it just comes across like, I just casually decided to do this right now. This is very, very charming of me. Like, it gives him, you should give him credit for that.
Absolutely. And then in stuff like The Undoing, where it's the other end of the spectrum.
Can I just fangirl about that for a minute?
Yes,
that
please.
Was such a good show. Like, I watched. Patrick, have you watched it? I don't want to spoil it for you.
No, I have not. No.
Okay, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you should watch it. It was so good.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
It's
Thanks for
absolutely
having
fantastic.
us.
I mean, obviously, we couldn't have it any other way. We're doing a podcast on Love Actually. We have the guys who have the podcast on Love Actually. Check it out. What is Love Actually? Guys, thank you so much again.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much again to Beth and Patrick for coming on the podcast. You can find their podcast, What is Love Actually, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Instagram at Love Actually Pod. Right, Diggy, let's have a few more messages from the Hugh Grant fans, shall we?
Let's do it.
Hi, my name is Charlotte and I'm from Australia. I would give Hugh a pack of beer for Christmas, and of course my favourite part of Love Actually is Hugh dancing, because who doesn't like to see the British Prime Minister getting their moves on?
Yes, Charlotte.
Short and sweet.
I love that though. Get him a pack of beer. Simple as that.
I wonder what kind of beer she'd get. Probably not Foster's, because that isn't actually Australian, right?
No, is it not?
I don't think so.
So what? So the whole Australian thing's just a marketing tactic.
I think so, isn't it? That's
to
what I
make
thought.
It seem far-reaching and exotic.
Exactly. Good, cool.
Great, cool. Great. Good. Yeah. That's too quick for me, mate. That's class. That's class. Charlotte, you're a legend. Keep it up. Right, let's have another one.
Hello, I'm Flossie.
I'm Luke.
And we're from London. And for Christmas, we would get Hugh Grant
Rupert Murdoch's head on a stick.
And a voucher for Pratt.
Specifically for baguettes.
For baguettes from Pratt. And my favourite bit of Love Actually, I don't know if it's yours, Luke, but my favourite bit is when Emma Thompson realises that the necklace wasn't for her, and then she cries in her bedroom listening to Joni Mitchell, and then her kids come down the hallway and she wipes away the tears and pretends that she's okay. It's so sad, but it's my favourite bit.
I like it when the little lad is thinking he might be a bit shit at the drums, but then he's really good at the drums.
That's really good.
I love that.
Oh, Flossie and Luke, thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. Oh, wow.
I just want to start with Luke's final point about the kid, because it is ridiculous that the kid suddenly is just like this app. He's like sort of John Bonham on the drums. By when it comes to when they get to the concert, he just doesn't look like he should be good at the drums. He's too small.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, his little feet couldn't touch the pedals at the bottom that you need for the bass and the hi-hats. You're absolutely right. And Flossie, you're absolutely right about the Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson in every film. I've said this before on the pod. What's so good is that Hugh Grant and Emma Thompson are in so many films together, and oh my god, is she the best actor ever to live? And this film is so good for that, for seeing more of her. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much for your submission, gang.
Also, let's get Rupert Murdoch's head on a stick.
Hugh, I think, unfortunately, Charlotte et al., your presents are fantastic, but Hugh really would like Rupert Murdoch's head on a stick. I think that one's the best one. Right, let's have one from Michelle.
Hello, my name is Michelle and I'm from Zurich, Switzerland, and I would give to Hugh Grant for Christmas a punching bag with Colin Firth's face on it, so you can punch Colin and he can stay fit.
That's so good.
I don't really hate Colin, but you have to pick a side here. My favorite scene of Love Actually is when Hugh rings on all these doors and he tries to find Natalie, and then he finally finds the right house, and it's really awkward because the family opens, and then Natalie comes down the stairs and says, "Where the fuck is my fucking coat?" And it's so good. Then she's like, "Oh, there's Hugh."
Firstly, I absolutely 10 out of 10 for switching from your beautiful Swiss accent to like an Essex accent. That was absolutely brilliant.
Class.
And you know what? I mean, I think we're on the same page here. You Colin Firth, Hugh Grant, you got to pick one. And the punch bag, that is I think you would like that a lot.
He would love that. What would be nice is if it was like the beginning of that James Bond film where the guy's like punching the punching bag and going mad, and then someone unzips the punching bag and a body falls out of it. And it was Colin Firth's body. That would be sick. Oh well,
Bridget Jones 4. That's the beginning of Bridget Jones 4.
Yeah.
Hello, it's Eliza Batten here from London. What would I get Hugh Grant for Christmas? I thought about this, and the one thing that sprung to mind was some anti-aging face cream, which may seem a bit harsh, but I just don't think he's aged very well. Though I don't know if face cream you need to start a bit more in advance. Nonetheless, always worth a try. And my favourite scene from Love Actually, the scene that really sticks out for me, is when I first watched it, I was quite young, and the woman, I can't remember her name now, but she was getting it on with the guy she really fancied. She's got an American accent. Her bedroom's sort of on a balcony, and I remember she got her boobs out, and that was the first time I'd ever seen boobs on television, and I may or may not have rewinded the scene a couple times. I was just so in awe of these boobs. And then she gets a call, I think, from her brother or something. But yeah, that's my favourite scene because it was the first time I saw boobies. But anyway, thanks for having me on briefly, and happy Christmas.
I'm not going to lie, Eliza. I'm not very happy with you at all. I'm not very happy with you at all. What's this anti-aging cream bullshit? Oh, best to start early.
Give a man a break. He's 60 years old.
Yeah, come on. And he has been a heartthrob for so long. He's allowed a few decades off.
Exactly.
Having a lovely baby face. That's savagery, and I won't hear it on this podcast.
You're on our naughty list for Christmas, Eliza, and you're getting coal from Hugh Grant for Christmas.
Exactly. You're going to get Rupert Grint's head on a stick. It's meant to be. It's Rupert Murdoch. Wrong Rupert. We don't want to get Rupert Grint. That'd be a terrible mix-up.
Anyway, happy Christmas, though.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, guys. We'll have a few more submissions a little bit later. But if you thought Beth and Patrick had waited patiently to speak, wait until you hear from our third guest here to speak with us today, Christopher Orr, author of infamous reviews of Love Actually. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It is our absolute pleasure. Just to get us kicked off and started, can you introduce yourself and give us a bit of a background to your career?
Well, I think you summarized it pretty quickly. I also worked at the New Republic for many years, but have spent about the last 10 years at the Atlantic in a variety of different jobs, both editing and writing, principally about film, but also television. But the more important history is, I think, my history with Love Actually.
Yes. We're here to obviously talk about Love Actually, starring Hugh Grant, among others. When did you first see it? Did you see it in the cinema?
I did see it in the cinema with great enthusiasm. The cast, obviously, is world class. And I immediately hated it and wrote an extremely negative review. So I didn't like the movie then. It came and it went, and it sort of gradually built up this committed viewership and became known as sort of a holiday classic. And it wasn't until some conversations in 2013 where a couple people talked to me about how everyone they know watches Love Actually every December and it's a beloved family tradition that I realized quite how firmly it had ensconced itself in the culture. So I watched it again, wondering if I'd missed something that first time I'd seen it. And I don't think I had. If anything, I liked it even less. It's not merely unromantic, but I think it's actually anti-romantic. I think if you look at the film a little bit closely and at the common themes throughout the many storylines, it has some quite clear lessons about love, and those lessons are almost all wrong, and at least a few of them are really quite appalling. So I wrote that piece for The Atlantic. Love Actually is the least romantic film of all time. And various follow-up pieces, and there were a lot of responses in other outlets. It had become a hashtag, the Love Actually Wars.
Were you surprised by the backlash?
No, the big surprise for me, I knew there would be a backlash. I knew it would hit a nerve. I mean, there were some harsh negative pieces, some of them quite hilarious, that were also written in the wake of that 2013 piece. Trying to take apart my piece. Trying with very little success to take apart my piece. And also just a huge amount of feedback. I do think that there is I don't know if it's a silent majority, but it is a quiet plurality of people who really, really dislike Love Actually.
So you've mentioned a few of those things. Give us some of the headlines. What is anti-romantic about the film?
Well, I think in that 2013 piece, I think I broke it down to sort of 3 lessons that it's offering. Those lessons essentially are that love is something that happens immediately and that it requires no compatibility that is intellectual or based on personality or anything like that. In one obvious case, the 2 characters don't even speak the same language. So the initial idea is that love is just this sort of chemical reaction that hits you like a thunderbolt, and you don't really need anything else to know you're in love. You don't ever need to actually get to know the other person on any level at all. The second is that in order to fulfill this sort of thunderbolt of love, all you need to do is have one grand romantic gesture. And again, that gesture doesn't have anything to do with getting to know anything about the other person and what they like or dislike, or with working through any difficulties you might have together, nothing like that. It's just, you need to run through Heathrow shortly after 9/11. You need to learn to speak Portuguese so you can ask somebody to marry you. You need to kiss somebody on the stage of a child Christmas play. And then the third, and this is the one that really displays where love actually is coming from. The third lesson is that if there are any actual problems that crop up in the relationship, then probably you should just give up. You shouldn't even try to fix them. It will never work. You're doomed. You may die a spinster, but there's really no point in even making the effort to try to overcome obstacles. And you see this in the two stories that don't end happily.
With Laura Linney and Carl. And,
with regard to the Laura Linney storyline, the difficulty that she has is she has a brother who's institutionalized and who calls her frequently on the phone and needs her attention. This really is not what, by any of the laws of fiction or real life, should be an insurmountable obstacle. She finally gets her date with Rodrigo Santoro, who she's worshipped from afar for whatever it was.
2 years, 7 months, 3 days, and I suppose an hour and 30 minutes.
They go on this one date. Her brother calls on the phone twice during that date, and they give up. They don't plan another date. They don't do any. It's obviously hopeless. If she's going to get phone calls from her brother, she clearly has to die single. And I think it's absurd. Had the movie bothered to suggest that they tried repeatedly, to get together, and her brother was always an issue, and ultimately she had to make the choice between the two, maybe you can make that work if you put a little time into it. But it's done, like everything in the film, because there's so many storylines, so quickly that I think its message is basically, well, she's got something that's inconvenient for this relationship, and therefore she just has to give up.
You mentioned in the piece that you wrote worrying trends between the different storylines in Love Actually. Is there a storyline that's similar to this one in terms of why it's bad?
So, of course, the other principal storyline that I think falls in with the Laura Linney-Rodrigo Santoro storyline as one in which complications appear and are presented as impossible to overcome is, of course, the Emma Thompson-Alan Rickman storyline, which I think is by far the most fully realized storyline of the entire film, the most realistic, the one that has the most genuine emotion in it. This is a couple that's been together and married for a very long time. They seem pretty content together. They seem affectionate. He is targeted by this extremely predatory assistant, and as middle-aged men occasionally do, he falls for it to the extent where he buys her a locket. There are people who will claim that they've slept together based on a rumpled bed in the background when she's sitting somewhere. I sort of think that's nonsense. I think if the movie doesn't even show Alan Rickman anywhere near her apartment or show them together at night ever, it's absurd to assume they've slept together. So if his indiscretion was really that he bought, a $50 necklace for his assistant because he was feeling a little frisky, is that a betrayal? Of course it is. It's definitely a betrayal. Is that the worst betrayal imaginable and the certain death of the marriage? I think that's absurd. I think marriages have overcome far worse than that. I think most marriages have probably overcome things worse than that. And I think the interesting comparison here when it comes to sort of marital betrayals is to the Keira Knightley-Andrew Lincoln storyline. And I think what Keira Knightley does with Andrew Lincoln is arguably a considerably greater betrayal than what happens between Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman. But it's presented as completely charming. I mean, as romantic in itself. Don't tell your husband, but I'm down here wooing you. Keep your newlywed husband in the dark about the fact that his best friend is hitting on his wife. I mean, that's kind of awful.
I think your piece, there's one thing that people can't refute, and this is the problem that, all the response articles, they all fall under the same final hurdle. They may make good points about everything else, but they can't defend the indefensible. And you make such a good point about the Andrew Lincoln, Keira Knightley story. It's so horrid. But what's so much more insidious about it, like you say, is it's presented to us as this beautiful, romantic, cute little thing. But it's horrible from the best friend and from Keira Knightley, the wife. It's awful. You're so right.
Diggs, I think I'm going to disagree with you there.
Oh my god.
Oh no. No.
I don't excuse it totally. I do think that it does come across as a bit stalkery.
Oh, yeah.
It is, his behavior is strange, to say the least, the way that he films only Keira Knightley at the wedding and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think that people generally like this storyline, because I think that there are lots of people out there who do kind of channel that a little bit. Not maybe to the same degree, not the same extent, but they understand that feeling of loving someone they shouldn't, or not receiving the love back from someone they do like. And I think there's that sort of tragedy about Andrew's character that a lot of people can relate to. Otherwise, I just think that most people just wouldn't watch people watch the film because of that. They watch the film because of that silly scene with the carol singers and the pieces of card that he brings to her house. So I don't know what to say, what the response is to that.
I'm not sure if that counts as a defense or not. I would say if you want to portray that tragedy, the way you do it is by focusing on Andrew Lincoln, by focusing on his sadness, and by focusing on the fact that he can't tell her that he's in love with her, or he has to pretend that it's all okay and he'll get over it, and not to worry, she's the wife of his best friend. Sure, it's a little awkward, but
this is this is a classic Richard Curtis trope, isn't it? Where he has characters who can't express their feelings. It's very, very similar to Kristen Scott Thomas's character in Four Weddings and a Funeral. She can't express to Hugh Grant's character that she's in love with him. I think what Richard Curtis is really going for is those people who, throughout Love Actually as well, who just don't have the balls to say to the person that they like that they can. And the whole point is that, I guess, at Christmas time, that you should say that thing that you couldn't say for the whole year.
Well, I mean, he's a guy who's in love with his best friend's wife. It's made painfully clear. I mean, the film really goes to extremes to make clear that he's not friends with Keira Knightley. They're not old college chums who he didn't suddenly realize that he's, was at all these years in love with Keira Knightley, who he thought it was his best friend. They make it very clear he's barely spoken to her ever, and he just thinks she's really, 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 really pretty. And this is important enough to him that he's going to go behind the back of his very best friend, who only just married this woman, solicit her participation in a secret against her husband, specifically saying, do not ever tell your husband that I'm here to pitch violent romantic woo to you. These are not healthy behaviors or good behaviors. And I think people mostly relate to it because Christmas carols are nice and Keira Knightley has a great little grin. And everybody in the film kind of pretends that this is normal and not some really sort of deviant behavior, which it is. One of the responses to that 2013 piece had a great bit where the writer described that scene as romantic but evil. And I've literally spent the last 7 years trying to think of if I can conceive of anything that I would think was romantic but evil. Maybe something with Ava Braun? I don't know.
What's romantic and evil is when Keira Knightley then kisses him on the cheek.
On the lips, isn't it?
Oh, is it on the lips?
I think it's a quick peck on the lips. I think it is.
Oh my God, it's even worse. It's even worse. And so they're both as bad as each other in that situation. But what do you say, Chris, to the people that will say, but Andrew Lincoln leaves and says, enough, that's enough?
That is the most ridiculous evasion. I mean, he literally just spontaneously says one word or a couple words enough, that's whatever it is, 3 words under his breath. And that's supposed to be more important than this entire plan that he launched where he was going to get cue cards and play carols and tell her, lie to your husband about this. I mean, there's no comparing the two.
You're so right. Oh my God, you're so right.
Anyone who loves as rashly and with so little concern for consequences to his best friend's marriage, to his own relationship with his best friend, anyone who cares so little about that and is so eager to love in this dangerous fashion is not just going to get over it because he got a little peck on the lips. That's not going to happen. Yes, Andrew Lincoln is still stalking Keira Knightley.
Yes.
So I wanted to move on quickly to the man of the moment, which is Hugh Grant. You haven't even spoken about him yet.
Yeah.
So in your original review in 2004, you said about Hugh Grant's role that it was a good joke for about 2 minutes and might have made a witty cameo, but unfortunately it's the closest thing the film has to a central role, and it's disastrous. I was wondering if you could expand on that and whether you've changed your tack at all in retrospect.
Explain yourself.
Yes, I will do my best. Again, I'm a big fan of Hugh Grant and was a big fan of Hugh Grant when I first saw the film. Part of it, I think I tried to explain. I think Hugh Grant's two most successful modes, the most famous one is the sort of, meek and bumbling Brit who is, sweet and disarming but a little clumsy. He also does have a knack, though, I think, for playing sort of sleazy overdogs, which is a role that I think he possibly played best, also in a Richard Curtis movie in Bridget Jones. And his role in Love Actually seems like a sort of almost a bizarre intermixing of the two. He's this massively powerful and successful man. He's clearly quite young to be prime minister. They don't really tell us anything about how he became prime minister, which is, I think, a little bit of a problem because he seems so implausible to begin with. It would be nice to have some idea of how this came to pass. But this incredibly successful man who must have worked hard and tried hard and had sharp elbows to get where he is, but who presents himself like the meek owner of a travel bookshop. I mean, everything about him is just sort of like giggling and stumbling and, oh, I feel silly, and, going door to door looking for this woman that he's fallen in love with, again, on the basis of maybe 50 exchanged words over the course of the whole film. So it's just a bizarre role. I can't conceive of somebody who could be prime minister who would be such sort of a amiable klutz. I just don't think those two things really go together. The dancing on the staircases is silly. For the most part, Love Actually is not a silly comedy. It's not an outright farce. And Hugh Grant's character is a character who I think is essentially a farcical character.
Wow. What do you say though? I suppose I'm thinking of some rebuttals. One of which isn't that the role of films to show us the exceptional? So that's why Hugh Grant's character's maybe a bit out there. That's why we warm to him and we identify in some ways.
We certainly want to see the exceptional. What I think we generally don't want to see is the impossible. And I just think his character is just an impossible character. There's never any real sense that he's prime minister. He always seems like he's sort of an ordinary guy pretending to be prime minister. When the film first came out, I thought that he reminded me a lot of Kevin Kline in the movie Dave, in which Kevin Kline is just an ordinary guy who happens to look exactly like the President of the United States. The President of the United States falls into a coma, and nobody wants to admit that the president's in a coma, so they take this ordinary guy, Kevin Kline, and he pretends to be president. And that's kind of what it feels like with Hugh Grant, except that he's really supposed to be the prime minister.
Is it not, though, the point that for anyone, regardless of status or age or whatever, it doesn't matter if you're the prime minister or Joe Blogs on the street, love can be exasperating and difficult? Isn't that the point of the character, that he, despite the fact he's got this power, is completely useless with the ladies?
I mean, I suppose, but again, the specific love interest in this case is a domestic staffer. She's not even in the politics wing here. She's not some sharp young person right out of Oxford who's going to, tell him how to plan his winning campaign or something. She's literally the person who brings him his cookies. And he falls in love with her because she accidentally swears the first time he ever sees her. And that is enough to cause him to fall deeply into a love that really would be somewhere between complicated and impossible. I mean, I think if the prime minister fell in love with a domestic staffer half his age, that would probably pose some significant problems. And again, it's like Colin Firth and Lucia Moniz, who, again, she's much younger. Again, she's a domestic staffer. Again, he falls in love with her without ever having spoken to her because they don't even speak the same language. And in that case, it's even worse because it's made extremely explicit that the moment he falls in love with her is when she strips down to her underwear to save his manuscript that's blowing into the lake.
Yeah, like I said, it's hard to argue, but you could argue that, we also have a prime minister in the UK who has fallen in love with someone 20 years younger than him. So it is plausible.
Well, it can happen, but usually it's, I think, both in real life and in film, it is or is portrayed as something that involves some kind of meeting of the minds, some kind of broader compatibility. I think the idea that you just see someone and immediately fall in love and that's all you need to know is a pretty shallow and ridiculous one. And it relates a bit to, I think, some of the relationships in other Richard Curtis films, including the other two movies that people sometimes think of as sort of a trilogy with Love Actually, that both star Hugh Grant, Four Weddings and a Funeral in Notting Hill. He has a tendency to have female characters who are just sort of objects onto which men can project whatever they most desire, pretty women. But at least in those two films, the women are presented as sort of successful adults and not as sort of vaguely infantilized subordinates, which is, again, I think, a recurring trope in Love Actually.
I mean, could it not be that film is fantasy, and yes, for any prime minister or president to fall in love with their staffer, as we saw with Bill Clinton, even with someone who might have been on a similar wavelength in the politics scene, it causes some issues.
Yes, I don't think that the operative word there is love, precisely.
No, that's true. But that's the fun of it. It's the fantasy. It's that even with all that, stacked against the odds, he literally can't help himself because he's infatuated with her. And every encounter they have only strengthens the bond and they fall deeper in love, even though, as we've said, it's not the longest time in which to show that happening.
But again, here you're saying every encounter they have, they fall deeper in love. I mean, how many encounters do they actually have over the course of the film?
4, but that's not the point.
How many minutes of total screen time together do they have? 10 minutes? Yeah. Probably tops? Look, they're not really falling more in love with each other.
But do you think then that, can you judge the film in the way that you're judging it? Because by the very nature of the film, because it's this ensemble piece and because it's split up into like 9 or whatever of these storylines, can you judge it in the way that you're judging it? Because nothing can be given the time that you want it to be given. So do you have to park that and think, okay, well, I've got to have every storyline with what I've got? It can't be given the time that it's necessarily needed, but do they have their own merits in their own ways with what they've given?
I mean, there's certainly some truth to that, although I think defending your movie on the grounds that I had so much stuff going on in it, I couldn't make any of it work properly is a pretty feeble defense.
That's so right.
But more than that, I mean, it does show you things. They do have time to show grand gestures again and again and again. You know, the screen time that went into those grand gestures. And let me again make clear, I am actually personally a very large fan of grand gestures, as my wife would be happy to declare with almost certainly a great deal of eye rolling. I just think that the message that grand gestures are all you need and there's nothing that you have to do before the grand gesture and there's nothing you have to do after the grand gesture is really kind of an appalling message. I mean, literally almost none of the romances in the entire film involve two characters who have one 5-minute conversation with each other. They don't do it. Nobody talks to anyone else. And as long as we're on the subject of fantasy, I would say that it is extremely notable that these fantasies that are so easy, that are middle-aged men finding a younger woman who they think is attractive, and with one grand gesture ensuring that they will, both be a happy couple for the next 50 years, that does not extend to the, slightly older women in the film. I mean, if this is the great fantasy, why does this fantasy not extend to Laura Linney? Why does this fantasy not extend to Emma Thompson? Both of them are sort of presented as women who are basically doomed because, they're too old to have a guy who's 20 years older decide on a lark that he's in love with them. So, again, I think if you want to say, but it's all just a bit about great happy endings and how people can express their love to each other and do the most difficult thing in the world, which is say, I love you. And Oscar, I completely agree with you. That can be the most difficult thing in the world. It has, throughout my life, been one of the most difficult things in my life. So I don't for a minute mean to suggest that is not a real difficulty that lots and lots of people have and that I have had in pretty much every romantic relationship I've ever had. It's that you do all that and then you say, but Laura Linney's screwed because her brother's in an institution. And, Emma Thompson is screwed because her husband bought a necklace for his assistant. I sort of feel like you can't quite pick and choose that way. You have to have some way of saying, well, if you think it's all about just like snapping your fingers and being in love, well, why does that rule not extend to the women in the film?
You're very convincing.
I haven't thought about the role of the old women in the film. You're absolutely right. That is so true and sad. It feels like every other demographic, like you say, it ends on a positive note for at least someone who represents them. Even the old gentleman in the film, with his hit single.
Bill Nye, yes. In my repressive society, every feature film would be required to have Bill Nye in it in some role. I love Bill Nye.
That's not repressive. That's fantastic. I'd vote for that. But I want to definitely talk about one of the articles that respond to you in particular. Your colleague Emma Green. She describes a scene at the Atlantic offices where the two of you and other people were arguing your cases for the movie. Can you paint that scene for us?
There's really not much more to say than what you just said. I love Emma. She's a great writer and a great human being. And I don't remember quite how it began. I just read something or had some conversation with somebody. Again, in 2013, in this run up to Christmas, I was sort of belatedly coming to terms with just how remarkably popular Love Actually is. And I was having a conversation with another colleague about how absurd that was. And as is often the case, and maybe the case even in this podcast, I was having that conversation at substantially elevated volume. Emma overheard me and came out and latched right into me. She loves Love Actually. She watches it every year. And so the two of us at great volume and to the deep amusement of the rest of the Atlantic staff just had a go at it for, 10 or 15 minutes. And various people in the Atlantic office were tweeting about it while it was taking place. And so it was it was a daffy little moment.
Who won?
Who's here on the show with you? If that's not a win, I don't know what would be.
That's so true. If we were good at our jobs, we would have got Emma on as well. But she wrote a response piece, and then you responded to that and the others. It was the whole thing. So I would recommend people go away and look that up. But I also want to ask this question: why do people like Emma? Why do they love it so much?
I think there's a strong wish fulfillment element of it. I think it suggests that falling in love is easy, and that consummating that love, and I don't mean sexually, turning that love into something where you're now a couple, only requires one big grand gesture, and grand gestures are fun, and that the only thing you need to do is overcome that deep terror of telling the person that you love that you're in love with them. And I think that's an extremely appealing fantasy. I don't really know quite how people fit that together, again, with the Laura Linney and Emma Thompson storylines, which are so very, very different. I do think that Emma Thompson storyline is by far the most fully realized of the film, and it may be that it grounds the film a little bit more and makes it seem, a little less like just sort of a flighty mass of people, shouting "I love you" at each other. Mm-hmm. But there's no more fundamental way for me to characterize my problem with the film than with the fact that you do have this series of wish fulfillments for men with younger women, and then two storylines in which, somewhat older women, I'm not sure precisely how old Laura Linney was at the time, but women who are not portrayed as sort of subordinates have some complication in their love lives, and it's just presented as completely insurmountable.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been brilliant.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a pleasure.
We hope that you have a very happy Christmas. Hopefully this year might be a strange one, but maybe you might want to stick on Love Actually.
There you go.
If you want to torture yourself more at the end of 2020.
I have two teenagers, neither of whom has seen Love Actually. So someday I will have to show it to them, if only so I can indoctrinate them in the church of hating Love Actually.
Exactly. The church. I like that. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much to Chris for speaking with us. You can follow him on Twitter @OrChris. That's @ORRCHRIS. Right, Oscar, I can't bloody wait. So let's get back and have some of these final submissions.
I can't wait. Up to now, they've been so good.
They've been so good. Thank you so much, everyone. Here we go. This one is from Bella.
Hello, I'm Bella and I'm from Germany. I would get Hugh a goldfish as a Christmas present. And my favorite part of Love Actually is the press conference scene between the Prime Minister and the American President. And it's my favorite part because I really liked David's speech there. I think it's very, very moving. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas and also a Happy New Year.
Oh, I love you so much, Bella. A goldfish is Oh, I love it.
It's brilliant.
Why not?
I mean, I don't know where she's got that from, but
it's kind of a classic present, isn't it? You know, maybe for sort of toddlers and young children. And he's got young children. And sometimes I think what we like about Hugh is his sort of childish naivete. So perhaps the goldfish works. I don't know. It works for me. I'd love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we saw in The Undoing that he can't look after a dog. So maybe he could have better luck with a goldfish.
Worse than that. But we won't give away any spoilers. Couldn't look after anyone. All right. This one is from Ella HR.
Hello, my name is Ella HR. So, personally, what I would get Hugh Grant for Christmas, I would either get him a golf book, which for tricks and loads of tips, because he's been doing it, loads of golf recently. Or I would either get him a book with a quote book with loads of quotes from Four Weddings and a Funeral, Bridget Jones' Diary, Small Time Crooks, Rome in the Wind, loads of funny movies like that. Personally, my favourite Love Actually scene has got to be the dance scene. I find it hilarious, and the fact that he found it, for some reason, he did not like it, because as he said in the documentary Hugh Grant Life on Screen, he hated it. He had to get out. It was really early in the morning. He had to do this long, this dance in front of camera crew. You know, he didn't want to do it. But for some reason, that makes it even more funny, the scene. And for me, it's the highlight of the movie, personally. But it's a great movie. So, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you so much. I hope you said as well there it was a great movie. I hope you weren't too offended by the conversation we had with Christopher.
Exactly, yeah.
But the golf book for tips and tricks, it sounds like from what Hugh says, he needs that book. So that would be a great one. And also, I think he should have a book of his favourite, a book of quotes from those films.
Yeah,
because
I think it'd be a good toilet, a good toilet book, you know?
Yeah,
I think that would sell
exactly.
really well. Lots of people just want to scroll through Hugh Grant's best quotes while taking a shit.
And also, I don't think he appreciates himself enough. I feel like he should go and sit down in the toilet and go, hey, you know what? I was in some good films. These are some good quotes from those films. And also, learn some golfing tips at the same time. Plop. Right. Let's have the final one. This one is from Ingrid.
Hello, my name is Ingrid, I'm from Brazil, and if I could give Hugh Grant a Christmas gift, I would give myself. I will wrap myself in some nice Christmas paper with a red ribbon on the top, and I'm pretty sure he will love it. But that's not really well seen in our societies, so I would just give him a book or something. My favorite scene in Love Actually is when the Prime Minister is knocking on doors just to see if he can find Natalie, and he knocks on this door and those three girls came and they ask, "Are you singing Christmas carols?" And he looks really confused in the beginning, but then he just do it. He sings with the help of his driver, and they both sing Christmas carols to the kids, and they have no idea who the Prime Minister is, yet they look so happy and they're dancing. I think that scene is pretty cute. I like the entire sequence because it is really romantic. It is a top 10 rom-com moments. And I like in the end when he's in the car with Natalie and that little boy dressed in an octopus outfit.
That's a great one.
That is a great one. Giving yourself as a present, I have to, it's quite annoying because I feel like that was my idea for his present. So bloody hell, Ingrid, you've taken that one from me. But one thing I want to say to all of you that have submitted as well is what we have so many people from all over the world. You know, Brazil, Australia, Zurich. You know, I feel. Thank you so much, guys, for your submissions. They've made us laugh so much. They've been absolutely brilliant.
Well, yeah, I mean, last time that I counted, we have listeners in nearly 80 countries now, including the likes of Uzbekistan, Botswana.
Yeah,
like all these countries around the world. So it's humbling.
Right. Well, that's another episode in the bag. Merry Christmas, everyone.
I know. I think we all need a big Christmas break, don't we? We need a big glass of red wine and some nice chocolates.
Stick Love Actually on the television. Listen to Beth and Patrick's podcast, What is Love Actually? Prep yourself and then, which is 12 episodes long. What was that? Must be 15, 16 hours of listening.
Yeah, you basically got your Christmas sorted there.
Yeah, exactly. 12 days of Christmas, 12 episodes. You can listen to those, then watch Love Actually, and then think, wow, what a great film. And then listen to our interview again with Christopher Orr and think, Christ, that is a shite film. And then come back to us and enjoy. We will have a best of 2020 coming your way, so you can relive some of your favourite moments from Taking Hugh for Granted. And then, guess what, guys? We've got another year of Hugh Grant next year. We've got more Taking Hugh for Granted on the way.
I believe Mickey Blue Eyes might be first up in the new year. It's an absolute
so.
cracker, so it's another one to look forward to.
What a bizarre film, but what a fabulous film. I think I really enjoyed it. Not to give away too many spoilers, but I had a good time with it, I think.
I did as well, yeah. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Exactly. So that's your watching and your reading over this period. Like we're not going to send you away without any homework. Go and watch Mickey Blue Eyes and then get your bottoms back here, because we are going to be back pronto. I'm going to be talking more Hugh Grant. Right. I love you guys so much. This is so good, isn't it?
It's so great. It's so great.
Happy Christmas. Merry holidays.
Happy New Year.
And we'll see you in the new year. Well, maybe a bit before that. Maybe a bit after that. We'll see you in the new year. Goodbye.
Bye.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.